Story number 1. The teddy bear's voice. It started with a whisper, not the kind you hear in the wind or mistake for the hum of an old house settling. This was her voice, Lila's voice, clear as the day she'd giggled at the butterflies in our backyard. 3 weeks after we buried her, her teddy bear began to speak. Lila fought leukemia for 2 years. She clung to that raggedy honey-brown bear. Honey, through every hospital stay, every round of chemo, every night she couldn't sleep. When she died, we tucked Honey into her casket, thinking it'd comfort her. But at the last second, Mom panicked. "She can't sleep without him," she said, fishing the bear out. None of us noticed how heavy it felt. The first time it happened, Jamie woke me up at 3 a.m., trembling. "Lila's talking," he whispered. I followed him to her room, half asleep, half terrified. Honey sat slumped on her bed, staring at the doorway. Then it came again. A faint, lisping, "Jamie, play with me?" Just like she'd asked 1,000 times. Dad blamed the vents. "Old houses play tricks," he said. But Mom's face went pale. She'd heard it too. After that, Honey wouldn't stay quiet. Jamie carried him everywhere, to school, to dinner, even to the bathroom. The bear sang "Twinkle, Twinkle" during breakfast, whispered "I'm cold" while Mom watered the garden. One night, it shushed Jamie when he cried. "It's okay," it said, soft as a breath. We took it to Uncle Mark, an engineer. He tore Honey apart, expecting wires, a hidden speaker. Instead, gray dust spilled out, gritty, cold, smelling like burnt wood. "What the hell?" Mark muttered. Mom collapsed. She knew that smell. The funeral home director folded when Mom threatened to sue. "The furnace malfunctioned," he admitted. "We reused stuffing from donated fabric. Sometimes ash got mixed in." Turns out Lila's ashes weren't just in the urn we buried. Some of her bones, her dust, had been sewn into Honey's belly. Mom dove into research. She read about Taiwanese families who believe souls cling to ashes if rites go wrong. Victorian mothers who stitched hair into lockets to keep their children close. "It's not a ghost," she told Dad. "It's a echo." But Jamie didn't care. He slept with Honey tucked under his chin, smiling for the first time in months. "She's still here," he'd say. Then the whispers turned darker. "Hurts, Jamie." Lila's last words. We buried Honey in her grave on a freezing December morning. Father O'Connor said prayers we didn't understand. Jamie tucked in her favorite storybook. Mom read a poem. The house is quieter now, but sometimes when the heat kicks on, Mom's pendant, the one with Lila's ashes, warms against her chest. She swears it hums. The scientists say it's resonance, ash vibrating in the vents, shaping sound into something familiar. The shrink calls it grief playing tricks. I don't know what it was, but I know this. Grief isn't a ghost. It's the echo of love that outlives the body. And sometimes, if the world breaks just right, that echo finds its way home. Jamie's better now. Mostly. But last week he asked me, "What if we got another bear?" I didn't answer. Some questions don't need answers. Story number 2. The Midnight Fax Machine. Let me tell you about the summer I learned to never trust old machines. It was 2021, and I'd just graduated college. Buried in student loans, I took a night job at a law office downtown. The pay was decent, and the work sounded simple. Sort files, refill the coffee machine, and stay awake until dawn. Easy, right? The office was on the 8th floor of a building that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped flies. The carpet was stained with coffee rings and frayed at the edges. And in the corner of the room, under a flickering desk lamp, sat an old fax machine. Its plastic casing was yellowed with age, the cord coiled up and shoved behind it like a dead snake. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. I sorted files, drank bitter coffee, and tried to ignore how the air smelled. Sharp. Not like paper or ink, metallic almost, like the scent of old pennies or the inside of a fuse box. I figured it was just the building's wiring. At exactly 3 a.m., the fax machine turned on. I froze mid-yawn. It wasn't plugged in. I'd checked earlier. The cord was still tucked behind it, dusty and untouched. But there it was, whirring, groaning, like it hadn't been used in decades. A single page slid out with a mechanical hiss. 3 numbers, 14, 23, 9. No message, no context. Just those numbers, scrawled in shaky handwriting. I laughed. Maybe the day shift was pranking the new guy. I crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash. But the next night, it happened again. This time, the note had a name. Margaret Harlow. The name stuck with me. Earlier that week, I'd passed a small brass plaque in the lobby. It was tucked between potted plants, easy to miss. In memory of our beloved colleague. No dates, no details, just her name, polished so bright it looked like a warning. The next morning, I asked Janice, the daytime receptionist. She was mid-sip of coffee when I mentioned Margie's name. Her hands trembled, sloshing coffee onto the counter. Margie died 3 years ago, she said, her voice barely a whisper. They said it was an accident, something with the wiring in that old fax machine. That afternoon, I went digging. Not because I believed in ghosts, I just needed to prove to myself I wasn't going crazy. In the back of a filing cabinet, under stacks of dusty contracts, I found a memo Margie had signed. The handwriting was identical to the note. Same slanted M, same jagged H. That night, I unplugged the machine. I even flipped the circuit breaker, plunging the office into darkness for a full minute. Double-checked every outlet, triple-checked the cord. But at 3 a.m., it printed again. A Polaroid. Blurry, but unmistakable. Me. Asleep at my desk, head resting on a pile of files. But I hadn't slept. Not once. I'd been wide awake, staring at the clock, counting the seconds until 3 a.m. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. The next night, I brought a camera. One of those old handheld camcorders my dad used to film birthdays. I set it up in the corner, pointed right at my desk. I wanted proof. Of what, I wasn't sure. At 3 a.m., the machine whirred. Another note. You should have left. I grabbed the camera. The timestamp read 3:02 a.m. The video was pure static. But the audio? A voice. Faint, garbled, repeating the same numbers from the first note. 14, 23, 9. I played it again. And again. The voice didn't sound human, more like a recording played backward through a broken speaker. I quit the next morning. Didn't even finish the week. Janice didn't ask why. She just nodded, like she'd been expecting it. But here's the thing. The shirt I'm wearing right now, it's the same one from the Polaroid. And last week I got a letter, no return address. Just my name scribbled on the envelope in handwriting I recognized. Inside was a single fax. 2 words. Still here. The handwriting was mine. I tried to laugh it off. Burned the letter. Drank until I passed out. But 2 nights ago, I woke up to a sound I hadn't heard in years. Whirring, groaning, from my home office. I don't own a fax machine. So if you're ever working late, and hear a machine turn on by itself, walk away. Don't stay to ask questions. And never look at the photos. Story number 3. The Vanishing Village. This isn't a ghost story. It's worse. It's real. And it started with a journal my grandfather left me. He was a fur trader in the 1890s, and his entries read like something out of a dime novel. Blizzards, wolf packs, trading posts lit by kerosene lamps. But one page stopped me cold. Dated October 12th, 1892, it described a logging town called Blackwood Hollow. 200 souls, a mill running day and night, children chasing dogs in the streets. Then, mid-sentence, the silence here is unnatural. The meals are still warm, but the rest was torn out. I'd studied vanished towns in college. Roanoke, Silent Colony, Yuba County. But Blackwood Hollow wasn't in any archive. No maps, no census records. Just my grandfather's journal and coordinates scribbled in the margin. Last winter, I flew to Ontario. The closest town was a 10-hour drive from Thunder Bay. Locals called the area the Dead Zone, a stretch of wilderness where GPS died, compasses spun like drunk dancers, and hunters swapped stories about shadows that followed them home. I hired a guide, Walter, a Cree trapper whose family had lived here for generations. He agreed to take me to the tree line. No further. That place is cursed, he said, lighting a hand-rolled cigarette. My great-grandfather rode there in '93, found tables set, fires lit, like the whole town stepped out for air and never came back. He blew smoke into the frost. Even the ravens avoid it. I laughed. Curses weren't real. History was. We left at dawn. The snow was hip-deep, the cold gnawing through my parka. After 6 hours, Walter stopped. This is as far as I go. He pointed to a pine tree marked with faded red paint. Follow the blazes and don't touch anything. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Pine and frost, sure, but underneath it, something sweet, like molasses or burnt sugar. Then I saw the cabins. They weren't ruins, not even close. The roofs were slate, chimneys straight. One cabin had laundry hanging on a line. Flannel shirts, wool dresses, frozen stiff. A child's mitten lay in the snow, red yarn frayed but intact. I stepped into the mill first. Long tables were set for dinner, bowls of stew frozen solid, forks mid-air, as if dropped in a hurry. A ledger lay open on the counter. The last entry. October 12th. 200 pounds of furs shipped to Montreal. Payment received. But the date was wrong. October 12th, 1892. The same day my grandfather's journal entry ended. Outside, I found footprints, dozens of them, pressed into the mud near the general store. Boots, moccasins, small bare feet, all leading into the woods, none coming back. I followed them. The trees thickened, sunlight fading to a dull gray. Half a mile in, I found a doll. Porcelain face cracked, dress stained with mud, its arm pointed deeper into the forest. That's when I heard the voices. Not whispers, not wind. Clear, loud, like a crowd arguing. A man's voice. "Check the traps." A woman sobbing, children giggling. I spun around, nothing but trees and that cloying, sweet smell. "Hello?" my voice echoed. No answer. I ran back to the cabins. My hands shook as I checked my camera. 200 photos. Gone. Just empty black frames. That night, Walter found me at the tree line. I hadn't even realized I'd walked back. "Told you," he said, handing me a thermos of bitter coffee. The land remembers. Back home, I dove into archives, spent weeks in Montreal's library, found a yellowed newspaper clipping from November 1892. Entire village vanishes, Blackwood Hollow empty, tables set, fires lit, no signs of struggle. The article quoted a Mountie who'd investigated. It's as if they vanished mid-bite, mid-step. But one detail chilled me. A single word carved into the church door. Gone. I thought that was the end of it, until last week. A package arrived. No return address. Inside was a doll's arm, porcelain, cracked, dressed in faded gingham, and a note. "You shouldn't have followed the footprints." The handwriting matched my grandfather's journal. He died in 1921. So tonight, as I sit here, I keep my curtains closed. Because outside, in the dark, I hear things. A man shouting, "Check the traps!" A woman sobbing, and the giggle of a child. But when I look, nothing's there. Story number 4. The Finnish Silent Children. When I was 7, my grandmother gave me a necklace, a silver pendant shaped like a reindeer. "This will keep the silence away," she said. I didn't understand what that meant until I stood in a Finnish blizzard, staring at children who weren't there. My grandmother was Sami, part of a reindeer herding family near Inari. She grew up in a world where the northern lights whispered secrets and snowstorms hid stories older than roads. After she died, I found her journal. Not recipes or memories, but warnings. "If the wind stops mid-storm, hold your breath," she wrote. "If you see footprints that end too soon, walk backward." And one entry, smudged with age. "The silent children are not children. They are the snow's memory." Last winter, I traveled to Lapland to retrace her life. Not for ghosts, for answers. My guide, Eva, met me at Ivalo Airport. She had my grandmother's sharp cheekbones and the same leathery hands from decades of braiding reindeer reins. As we drove north, the road dissolved into a tunnel of pine trees. Snowflakes began to fall, and Eva broke the silence. "Revontule will dance tonight, but keep your camera close. The Hiljaset Lapset don't like lenses." "Silent children?" I asked. She glanced at me, her eyes narrowing. "They play where storms buried villages. No footprints, no laughter, just..." She flicked her fingers like falling snow. "Your grandmother knew. She saw them too," I scoffed. "Ghost stories." Eva's grip tightened on the wheel. "She left Finland for a reason." The blizzard struck like a fist. One moment, the sky was twilight gray. The next, a wall of white swallowed the road. Eva cursed, pulling over. "We wait." But through the chaos, shapes moved. Children, 5 or 6, in wool coats too thin for the cold. They wove between snowdrifts, their movements fluid, like shadows cast by a flickering lamp. No footprints, no sound, just pale faces glowing faintly, as if lit from within. Eva grabbed my arm. "Don't! Look! Away!" But I was already rolling down the window. The cold punched my lungs. Wind screamed, yet the children... They moved in perfect silence. One paused, tilting its head. Its eyes weren't black, not white, hollow, like 2 voids carved into ice. I raised my camera. Click. They froze, all of them, then turned toward me. My breath caught. Their mouths opened. No sound, just darkness. Eva yanked me back, slamming the window. "Fool!" she hissed. "They'll follow us now." That night, in her cabin, Eva stoked the fire and tossed me a journal bound in reindeer hide. "My 80s, she said. "Read it." The pages were brittle, filled with sketches of children with hollow eyes. One entry, dated March 14th, 1932, stood out. "Today the schoolhouse vanished. 20 souls. Elias says the snow ate them. I heard laughter in the storm." I looked up. "What happened?" Eva poked the fire. "A blizzard swallowed the school. Search parties found nothing. Just a diary." She handed me a photocopy. The teacher's words crawled off the page. March 12th, 1932. "Aino swears she saw children outside. They want to play," she cried, "but the storm hasn't stopped for days." March 13th. "Knocks all night. The children say it's their friends. I barred the door." March 14th. "The snow. It's alive. Faces in the drifts, voices in the walls. They're inside. The children want to..." The rest was waterlogged. The next morning, I drove to Inari's archives. The librarian, an elderly Sami woman with a silver braid, stiffened when I mentioned 1932. "Not many ask about that," she said. leading me to a dusty back room. Newspaper clippings, telegrams, and a faded class photo. 20 children, 1 teacher, all staring at the camera with hollow eyes. The librarian pointed to the teacher. Marja Leitonen. Her diary was found in the snow. The rest, gone. Why? I asked. She hesitated. The Sami say storms hunger. Some feed them. I returned to New York, convinced it was over. Then, one July night, my air conditioner died. I woke shivering. The thermostat read 85 degrees Fahrenheit, but my breath fogged the air. Outside, snow fell, in Brooklyn, and across the street. Small figures, silent, waving. I packed a bag and fled. But this morning I found a Polaroid in my mailbox. No postmark. Children, in my old apartment window, and scrawled on the back, in my grandmother's handwriting, "They remember you." My grandmother's journal sits on my desk now. I don't open it. But when the wind dies suddenly, I hear it. The creak of ice underfoot. And I wonder, what do the silent children want? Are they trapped? Or are they waiting for the next storm to feed? Story number 5. The Sleepwalking Artist. You ever take a job just to outrun your own thoughts? After my dad died, I picked up night shifts at a hospital. Not for the paycheck, but because the fluorescent hum of hospitals numbs things. No clocks, no sunlight, just the beep of machines and the occasional scream from the detox wing. Clara was patient 447. Schizoaffective disorder, chronic insomnia, and something called parasomnia. Fancy word for sleepwalking with extras. Her chart said she'd been found wandering Highway 9 at 3 a.m., barefoot, clutching a paintbrush crusted with something brown. They assumed it was mud. The first night I saw her, she was in the rec room. Moonlight cut through the barred windows, and she stood there in a faded floral gown, brush darting across a canvas. Swish, swish. The sound was rhythmic, almost soothing, like a mother rocking a cradle. "She's harmless," said Raj, the security guard. "Just let her paint. She'll wander back to bed by 4. But the painting? It was a gas station off Route 9, the kind with flickering neon and cracked pumps. Blood streaked the asphalt, thick, arterial splatters. A license plate, half buried in mud, GRZK 319. The next morning, Dr. Varma cornered me in the break room. Her coffee trembled in her hand. "Don't look up the news today." Clara's room reeked of turpentine and sleep aids. Canvases papered the walls. A drowned boy in a quarry. A car wrapped around a telephone pole. A convenience store robbery with a cashier's face blurred. All dated weeks before the real events. Coincidence? Dr. Varma insisted. She hears sirens, sees headlines, her subconscious stitches it together. But I started tracking dates. The drowned boy? Clara painted him on March 14th. The Herald ran the story March 28th. The cashier's name was Luis Garcia. I called the store. "Luis, he quit after the robbery," the manager said. "Moved to Nevada. Why?" I hung up. That night, I watched Clara sleepwalk again. Her eyes stayed shut, but her hands... God, her hands knew. She mixed paints without looking. Cadmium red for blood, Payne's gray for tire marks. Once, she painted a suicide in real time. The clock on the wall matched the 911 call timestamp. Raj found me staring at the canvas. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said. "I think we're making them." Clara had a nephew, Ethan. Skinny kid, maybe 19, who visited every other Thursday. He'd bring her sketch pads and sit silently, picking at his nail polish. One night, I caught him lingering after visiting hours. "She used to paint portraits," he said, "before the episodes. My mom's funeral, she painted the whole thing. Open casket, lilies, everything. 3 days before the accident." Accident? He peeled a sticker off his phone, a cartoon ghost. Mom drowned in Lake Merrill. They said it was a heart attack, but Clara's painting showed something else, a hand pulling her under. He swiped to a photo. The painting, a woman in a blue dress, waist deep in water, a shadowy figure gripping her ankle. And Clara burned it, said it was a mistake. The night it rained, the hospital groaned. Pipes clanged, and the air tasted metallic. Clara stood in the dark, charcoal screeching across paper. This time, she drew me. Scrubs, badge number 507. Body crumpled in the west stairwell, the one closed for renovations. My neck bent at a sick angle, face scribbled out. "It's just stress," Raj laughed. "You're spooking yourself." But I needed to see. The stairwell door creaked, a sound like bone grinding. Cold air slapped my face. The steps were littered with sketches. Dozens. All me. Dead. Version 1. My head cracked open on the railing. Version 2. Strangled with an IV tube. Version 3. Face bloated, water dripping from my lips. At the bottom, Clara stood in her gown, eyes closed. A shard of broken glass glinted in her hand. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered. Not her voice. Guttural. Wet. I ran. The door wouldn't budge. Bang, bang, bang. Then, silence. The glass shard lay at my feet. Wrapped around it was a Polaroid. Me, asleep at the nurse's station. A shadow loomed behind my chair. They found me in the supply closet, hyperventilating. Clara was sedated. The stairwell, clean, no sketches. I quit the next day. Dr. Varma blamed night shift psychosis. Raj texted me a week later. "Clara's gone. Family transferred her. No forwarding address. But last night, a package arrived. No postmark. Inside, a canvas. Thick oils, still tacky. It's me, typing this at 3 a.m. My laptop glow casts shadows. And in the corner of the painting, Clara's signature, smudged. The news says her body was found yesterday. Carbon monoxide. She'd been dead 3 days when the package arrived. But here's what they didn't report. The officers found 47 paintings in her apartment, all unfinished, all me. In one, I'm holding a baby. In another, I'm old. In the last, I'm painting. Story number 6. The Google Maps shadow. I need to tell you about the time I found myself in 2 places at once. It started last March. I was working freelance, editing skincare ad voiceovers. And let's just say excitement wasn't part of the job. You know how you'll do anything to avoid staring at a script? I'd spend hours on Google Maps, not planning trips, just clicking. Random coordinates in Siberia, abandoned malls in Ohio, that kind of thing. One night, I landed on a stretch of desert near Amboy, California. The Street View image was dated July 12th, 2022, my 28th birthday. I remember that day because I had mono. Slept through 3 episodes of The Office and ate half a tub of frosting. But in this photo, there's a shadow. A person's shadow. Long and stretched out, arms slightly raised, like someone taking a picture of their own feet. The pose was mine. Left hip cocked, right hand in pocket, even the shoes. Black Converse with a white stripe. Same ones I'd worn since college. I screenshotted it, tweeted WTF, and passed out. By morning, the tweet had 20,000 likes. The replies were split. Half said fake, the other half tagged horror podcasts. But one DM stuck with me. User at Echo Lake 44 sent coordinates and 2 words. Check again. I did. Same desert, same date, no shadow, just cracked asphalt and dead cacti. That's when my phone buzzed. A Google notification. Thanks for improving maps. I hadn't reported anything. Weird stuff kept happening. Small things. Spotify, my daily mix included a Finnish metal band called Kalman Kantasha. Lyrics about mirrors and shadows. I'd never heard of them. Netflix. My account watched The Ring at 3 a.m. I was asleep. Uber Eats, a receipt for tacos sent to Denver. I'm lactose intolerant. Then, one night, I saw it in my bathroom mirror. Steam from the shower fogged the glass. I wiped it with my palm, and there it was, a shadow. Not mine, taller, thinner, arms limp at its sides. I blinked. It was gone. My roommate Jess laughed when I told her. "You're being pranked. Remember when Mark photoshopped you into that Taco Bell ad?" But Jess didn't see the shadow reappear. In my Instagram stories, I'd posted a selfie at the grocery store. Bright lights, cart full of cereal. But in the bottom corner, a shadow. Same stance. Head tilted. Jess squinted. "That's just a shelf." I zoomed in. The shadow's hand was raised, pointing at me. I drove to Amboy. Stupid? Yeah. But Reddit threads insisted. "You have to go." The desert heat hit like a furnace. I parked where the Street View car had. Same angle, 1:37 p.m. I raised my phone to take a photo. My real shadow followed. But on the screen, two shadows. Mine and it. Taller. Still. Head tilted. I dropped my phone. When I picked it up, the photo was just desert. My GPS spoke. "Turn right onto unmarked road." There was no road. The rental car wouldn't start. My phone died. The air buzzed like a broken speaker. Moitoye found me sitting in the dirt. The mechanic frowned. "You drove 200 miles? Tank's empty." I hadn't moved. I deleted Twitter, switched to a flip phone, threw my laptop in a closet. Last week, Jess texted, "Why'd you tag me in this?" A Google Maps link. Coordinates to my apartment parking lot. Street View date, tomorrow, the shadow's there. Closer now, head tilted, waving. Story number 7. Hive mind headache. It started with a smell. Burnt wiring, maybe. Or old pennies. I'd just moved into my grandma's house after she died, and I figured it was the pipes. Until the dreams began. The first night, I dreamed I was standing in a hospital room. Fluorescent lights humming. 12 people sat in a circle, all wearing the same gray sweatshirt, hands clamped over their ears. Their mouths moved in unison, but no sound came out. Just static. I woke up drenched, my temples throbbing. The smell of copper soaked into my sheets. I Googled group nightmares and found a scan of a 1978 medical journal buried in a Reddit thread. Case study. 12 subjects reporting identical migraines and recurrent nightmares. The PDF was blurry, but I could make out phrases. Shared hallucinations, neural synchronization, unexplained cranial scarring. The patients had all collapsed on the same day, October 17, 1978, in different states. One was a teacher in Maine, another a trucker in New Mexico. All described the same nightmare. A concrete room, flickering lights, and a voice chanting numbers. The last entry chilled me. Subject 12 expired during EEG monitoring. Autopsy revealed abnormal tissue growth resembling insect larvae. I laughed. Clearly a hoax. But then my migraines got worse. The pain wasn't normal. It felt like something alive behind my eyes. Pulsing. Digging. I'd wake up with my hands crusted in dried blood from scratching my scalp. My doctor blamed stress, gave me pills that did nothing. Then I found the letters. Grandma's attic was full of moldy boxes. Under a stack of National Geographics, I found a manila envelope labeled HS Project 78. Inside were handwritten notes and Polaroids. The photos showed a young girl, my mom, maybe 15, holding a jar of black sludge. The notes were in Grandma's shaky cursive. Phase 3. Subjects report shared nightmares. Dr. V says we're close. God forgive us. A newspaper clipping fell out. October 18th, 1978. Local girl dies in sleep study accident. My mom's best friend, Sarah, cause of death, acute cerebral hemorrhage. That night the dream changed. The concrete room was colder. The 12 people were older now, wrinkled, hair gray. They stared at me. One man held up a jar of black sludge. The woman beside him mouthed, "You're late." I woke up with a nosebleed. My bedroom walls were covered in equations, my handwriting. But I hadn't written them. 4.8, 15, 16, 23, 42. The numbers from the journal. I drove to the abandoned clinic from the article. It was rotting. Boards over windows, ivy swallowing the sign. Hawthorne Sleep Institute. The door creaked open. Inside, dust motes floated in shafts of light. A desk calendar read October 17th, 1978. The basement door was padlocked, rusted. I kicked it open. The room matched my dreams. Concrete, flickering bulb, 12 chairs in a circle, and a smell, sweet, like rotting fruit. The walls were covered in the same equations I'd scrawled. Beneath them, a single sentence. "We tried to warn you." My migraine spiked, the room warped. For a second I saw them, the 12 people, younger, screaming into their hands. The sludge in the jar moved. Then silence. On the floor lay a cassette tape labeled Subject 13. I played it in my car. Static, then a man's voice. Day 17. The numbers aren't random. They're coordinates. 4.8 degrees south, 15.16 degrees west, 23.42 degrees north. Middle of the ocean. But the dreams? We all see it. A tower, black stone. Something's inside, calling us. We tried to resist, but... Coughing. It's in my head. Feels like... static. Hive. Tell Sarah I'm... The tape cut off. That was a week ago. The migraines are constant now. I hear them sometimes. Whispers in the static of my fan. The hum of my fridge. Last night I caught myself scratching equations into the bathroom mirror. And the dream. I'm in the tower. Black walls, veins of blue light. The 12 people are there, but their faces are mine. We're chanting the numbers. The sludge swirls in a pit below us, forming shapes, wings, teeth, eyes. I don't sleep anymore, but I know it's coming. The coordinates, I looked them up. 4.8 degrees south, 15.16 degrees west, 23.42 degrees north. They're not in the ocean. They're beneath it, and something's rising. You'll think this is a story, a creepypasta. But check your mirrors, your dreams, that itch behind your eyes when you're alone at 3 a.m. They're almost here. And we're going to open the door. Story number 8, the Autocryptic message. It started with a typo, just one. I was texting my sister about dinner. Pick up wine. But my phone autocorrected it to pick up mine. Weird, but harmless. Then it kept happening. Meeting at 7 became morning at 7. Where's the remote? Turned into, where's the body? I blamed iOS updates. My boyfriend Kyle joked, your phone's haunted. We laughed. Then I tried to type LOL, and it changed to run. The next morning, I woke up to 23 notifications. My notes app had filled overnight with gibberish. Except it wasn't gibberish. Phrases repeated in jagged blocks. The walls are too thin. He knows what I did. Dig under the roses. And one sentence, typed perfectly. I'm sorry, Eleanor. My name isn't Eleanor. I Googled the phrases. Nothing. Then I searched Eleanor Walls Too Thin. A Reddit thread from 2017 popped up. Grandma's suicide note keeps appearing on my devices. The user described Notes app glitches, random voice memos of sobbing, and a final post. I found her grave. The epitaph says, "Forgive me. I think she's in the walls." The account was deleted the next day. Kyle told me to factory reset my phone. But that night, as I scrolled through old texts, a new message appeared, not sent by me. They'll find you in the roses. E. My hands went cold. The message vanished. The next clue came from a typo. I tried to text, "Call me" to my boss. It corrected to Calais, Maine, a town I'd never heard of. Google Maps showed a single street view, a boarded-up colonial house with a garden of dead roses. The address? 47 Willow Lane. The photo date, October 14th, 1946. I zoomed in. A shadow loomed in an upstairs window. Tall, thin, one hand pressed against the glass. My phone buzzed. A notification from the Photos app. Memory from 1946. It was a scanned newspaper clipping. Local woman dies by suicide. Eleanor Voss, 32, was found in the garden of her Calais home. A note read, "The walls are too thin. He hears everything." The article mentioned her husband, Henry, who'd vanished in 1942. Presumed dead. But Henry wasn't dead. I drove to Calais. The house was still there, rotting. Dead roses choked the garden. The front door creaked open. Inside, the air smelled like mildew and copper. Upstairs, I found a nursery. Faded circus animals wallpaper, a crib filled with blackened stuffed bears, and a hole in the wall, small, jagged, like something had clawed through. My phone buzzed. A new note. "He's in the walls." Then I heard it. Scratching, slow, deliberate, from inside the hole. I ran. That night, Kyle stayed over. I didn't tell him about the house. At 3 a.m., my phone lit up. A voice memo played automatically. A man's voice, staticky and raw. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I tried to stay quiet, but he's hungry. He's always hungry." The next morning, Kyle was gone. His last text, "You were typing weird stuff last night. You okay?" I checked my sent messages. "Dig under the roses. He's in the walls with me. Tell Henry I'm sorry." I hadn't sent them. The police found Kyle's car at 47 Willow Lane. No sign of him. But they did find something else. Under the dead roses, buried in a metal box, a wedding ring engraved Henry and Eleanor, 1938, and a note, handwritten, not faded at all. "He's in your walls now." Aye. I moved apartments, got a new phone. Last night I tried to text "good night" to my mom. It auto-corrected to "he's here." And in the static of my bedroom fan, I hear it, scratching, from inside the wall, right behind my head. Story number 9. The haunted Victorian house. I moved into the Victorian on Willow Street for the light. On the tour, sunlight streamed through those stained glass windows, scattering rubies and sapphires across the oak floors. The realtor, a woman with a clipboard and a too-bright smile, called it a historic gem. She didn't mention the cold spots, or the way the floorboards groaned like something was pacing beneath them. But the rent was cheap, and after the divorce, I needed somewhere to disappear. The first week was quiet. Sure, the house creaked. Old bones settling, I told myself. But on the third night, a storm rolled in. Rain lashed the gables and I lay awake, listening to the wind scream through the turret. That's when I heard the footsteps. They started at the base of the staircase. Slow, deliberate. Creak, pause, creak, like someone climbing in heavy boots, waterlogged and weary. My bedroom door was cracked open, and I watched the hallway, frozen, as the sound reached the landing. The air turned frigid, my breath fogging like I'd stepped into a freezer. Then the chandelier in the foyer began to sway, prisms clinking softly, casting fractured rainbows on the walls. By dawn, the storm had passed. I convinced myself it was the wind. But the shadows started the next night. I'd catch them out of the corner of my eye. A flicker in the parlor mirror. A shape slipping behind the velvet drapes. Once, while washing dishes, I saw a silhouette in the kitchen window. Tall, shoulders hunched, standing behind me. I spun around, soap suds dripping from my hands, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the glass, the figure was still there, head tilted, its face a smudge of darkness. Then it dissolved, like smoke in a draft. I began lighting candles during blackouts, unable to bear the buzz of silence. The flames danced in the sconces, and sometimes, just for a heartbeat, the shadows seemed to lean closer, as if listening. Then I found the newspaper clipping. It was tucked inside a rusted music box in the tower room, a space the realtor had called quaint, but felt more like a tomb. The paper crumbled at the edges. The ink faded to a watery brown. The Daily Sentinel. October 31st, 1890, grisly discovery in Willow Street home. Police today uncovered the remains of Mr. Elias Voss, 47, in the cellar of his Victorian residence. Voss, a reclusive banker, had been missing for a fortnight. Authorities report his body was found seated at a dining table, set for two, with his skull cleanly bisected by an axe blow. No suspects identified. The house, deemed cursed by locals, remains vacant. The article ended abruptly, torn. Beneath it, scrawled in shaky pencil, were the words, "He's still hungry." That night, another storm hit. Thunder shook the walls, and the lights died. I grabbed a candle and ventured to the cellar, determined to check the fuse box. The door creaked open, revealing a staircase swallowed by darkness. The air smelled of damp stone and something metallic. Copper, maybe, or old blood. Halfway down, the candle flickered. At the far wall stood a wooden table, layered with dust. 2 china plates, 2 tarnished forks, 1 chair. Creak. The footsteps again, heavy and wet, descending the stairs behind me. I turned. The candle guttered, and in the quivering light, I saw him, a shadow figure, tall and broad-shouldered, gripping a translucent axe. Rainwater dripped from his coat, pooling on the floor. His face was a void, but I felt his gaze, cold and ravenous. Creak. Creak. Closer. I stumbled backward, knocking over the table. The plates shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The figure raised the axe, and I ran, tripping up the stairs, the candle snuffing out. I didn't stop until I was soaked and gasping in the driveway, the house looming behind me, its windows glowing faintly. Not with candlelight, with dozens of shifting shadows, pressed against the glass. I moved out the next morning. The realtor didn't blink. "5th tenant this year," she said, pocketing my keys. But last night, rain tapped at my new apartment window, and as I scrubbed dried paint from my hands, still smelling of that cellar of damp and rust, I heard it again. Creak. In the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. I checked the mirror. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed. But the shadow behind me wasn't mine. It was taller, and it held an axe. Sleep with the lights on. The creepy elevator. I took the promotion for the view. 42nd floor, corner office. Windows that stretched from carpet to ceiling, framing the city like a living postcard. The Sterling Tower was all glass and steel, a monument to modern ambition, but it had its secrets. The motion sensor lights in the hallway blinked like drowsy eyes after sunset. The air vents hissed in Morse code. And the elevator, Christ, the elevator, had a mind of its own after dark. By day, it was pristine, silent as a coffin, smelling of lemon disinfectant and corporate anonymity. But once the last commuters vanished and the storm clouds rolled in, it changed. The doors would stutter, juddering open and closed like a nervous tick. The floor buttons lit up for levels that didn't exist. B4, 13.5, 27A. Security dismissed it as a glitch. Pre-war wiring, they said, though the tower was built in 2003. But I knew better. On rainy nights, when the sky split open and the city drowned, the elevator remembered things. It started on a Tuesday. Rain slashed the windows, turning the skyline into a smeared watercolor. My sister's latest hospital bill glared from my inbox, so I stayed late, typing until my wrists ached. By 10 p.m., the office was silent. The only sound the hum of the vending machine down the hall. The lobby was deserted, the receptionist's desk littered with forgotten pens and a half-eaten muffin. I pressed the elevator button. It chimed, too bright, too eager. Inside, the mirrored walls multiplied my reflection into infinity. 1,000 versions of me in a black blazer and smudged mascara. I pressed L, but the panel flickered. 27A lit up instead. The doors closed. The air thickened, stale and metallic like licking a battery. Static crackled from the overhead speaker. No muzak, just a wet, gurgling noise. Then the lights died. I fumbled for my phone. The flashlight beam trembled as I aimed it at the mirror. My reflection stared back, and behind me, a woman in a beige pantsuit. Her head hung low, hair stringy and dripping, face blurred like a smudged photograph. I spun around. Empty. The elevator lurched. My phone clattered to the floor. When I grabbed it, the reflection showed 3 people now. The woman, a man in a construction helmet, and a little girl clutching a teddy bear with melted fur. The doors opened to the parking garage. Cold, damp air rushed in. Empty. I told Marcos, the night janitor, the next morning. He froze mid-mop, his coffee-brown skin paling to ash. You saw the shadow people. What? He glanced over his shoulder, the smell of Marlboros clinging to his uniform. This building's got history. Before the tower, it was a welfare office. 92, there was a fire. Electrical, they said. 12 folks got trapped in the elevator. Smoke, screams, nothing left but bones and badges. He dug a crumpled flyer from his cart. A faded photocopy. Memorial Service for Victims of Sterling Building Tragedy. The date, October 31st, 1992. Stick to the stairs after dark, he muttered, resuming his mopping. But the stairwell doors were chained shut. Fire code, a sign lied. The next storm hit on Thursday. Lightning forked the sky, and the power flickered. My heels blistered from a client meeting, so I risked the elevator. The mirrors fogged as soon as the doors closed, though the air was bone dry. I wiped one with my sleeve. Reflections don't lie. Behind me stood 7 people, a teenager in a Nirvana shirt, eyes hollowed to charred sockets, an old man clutching a briefcase fused to his hand, the girl with the teddy bear, her lips sewn shut with copper wire. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. The elevator stopped. 13.5 glowed red. The doors slid open to a concrete corridor, water dripping from exposed pipes. A crooked sign read, Welfare Office. The smell hit me, burnt hair and pork. The doors snapped shut. Last night was the worst. Rain drummed the windows as I packed up at midnight. The elevator reeked of wet ash. I jabbed L, but it plummeted, free-falling so fast my knees buckled. B4 lit up. The doors opened to a basement I'd never seen. Exposed wires snaked the walls. Puddles of black water rippled, though nothing dripped. Voices echoed, muffled screams, a fire alarm's dying screech. The mirror showed them all now. 12 figures, pressed shoulder to shoulder, skin blistered and sloughing off. The woman in the pantsuit pointed at the panel. 27A flickered. The elevator rocketed upward, screams vibrating through the shaft. The lights died. When they sputtered back on, the mirrors were cracked. And the people, they weren't behind me anymore. They were beside me. I don't take the elevator now. I camp out in my office till sunrise, surviving on vending machine coffee, jumping at every creak. But sometimes when the rain thrums the glass, I hear it. the ding down the hall. The doors wheeze open, empty, except in the reflection. They're always there, waiting, and the panels lit up. 27AB4, home. Story number 10. The Gravity Hill. I didn't believe in ghosts until I felt their hands on my bumper. Cold, desperate, and impossibly strong. Gravity Hill was one of those local legends everyone whispered about, but no one could explain. A quarter-mile stretch of crumbling back road where cars rolled uphill, engines dead, defying every law of physics. Kids parked there after dark, giggling nervously as they shifted into neutral and let their cars drift backward, tires crunching gravel. They'd swear they heard whispers in the static of their radios, or saw shadowy figures in their rearview mirrors. "It's the dead pushing," my friend Jess said, her eyes wide as she showed off the dent on her Honda's fender. "They don't like being laughed at." I was the skeptic, the kid who aced physics, who lined up dominoes on my desk to test velocity equations, who corrected teachers when they called it supernatural. But Jess's story gnawed at me. So the night before graduation, I borrowed my dad's rusted Ford pickup and drove to Gravity Hill alone. The road was a lonely scar through the pine forests, miles from town. No street lights, no reflectors, just the moon casting blue shadows over potholes and cracked asphalt. I killed the engine where the hill dipped, like Jess said. The woods hummed with cicadas, and the air smelled like wet pine and something sharper, like struck matches. I rolled down the window, listening. This is stupid. I shifted into neutral, let go of the brake, nothing. A minute passed. 2, the woods creaked. Then a low groan, like iron bending. The truck shuddered. Backward, uphill, my stomach dropped. The steering wheel turned icy under my palms. Through the rearview mirror, my headlights lit up empty road, but the truck kept moving, faster now, gravel popping under the tires. And then I felt them. Hands slamming against the tailgate, shoulders pressing into the bumper. Dozens, hundreds, pushing with a force that vibrated the chassis. The radio crackled to life, static bleeding into a hymn. "Shall we gather at the river?" I stomped the brake. The tires screeched. When I looked back, the road was empty, but the smell lingered. Sulfur and wet soil, like a freshly dug grave. Old Man Ritter knew the stories. He ran the Sinclair station on Route 30, his overalls stained with decades of oil and regret. When I mentioned Gravity Hill the next morning, his milky eyes sharpened. "You felt 'em, didn't you? The Breaker Boys." He spat into a Folgers can. Back in 2003, this was coal country. Mining companies hired kids, some no older than 8, to sort slate from coal. 12 hours a day, fingers raw, lungs black. Then one day, the Susquehanna mine flooded. 32 boys trapped. Took 3 weeks to dig 'em out. He unrolled a yellowed map, its edges brittle as autumn leaves. A red X marked Gravity Hill. Bosses dumped the bodies in an old air shaft, paved right over it for the new rail line. No markers, no prayers. Boys been pushing ever since, trying to get someone to notice. I went back. Not for a dare. For them, midnight again. The truck rolled uphill faster this time, pine trees blurring into a black tunnel. I let go of the brake. The radio hissed, the beautiful river." Shapes flickered in the rear view. Not shadows, boys. Overalls caked in coal dust, cheeks hollow, eyes glowing like embers. Their hands pressed against the glass, leaving smudges of ash. One sat beside me. I didn't look, but I felt his weight dent the seat. Smelled the rot of damp coal and decay. Heard his voice, wet and gurgling. "Ain't right," he rasped. "We keep pushing, but the dirt's too thick." The truck stopped. The door handles rattled. "Help us! Dig!" I didn't sleep for days. When I did, I dreamed of pickaxes and mud, of small hands clawing at stone. This morning I woke with dirt under my nails, my palms blistered, my jeans reeked of sulfur. In the truck bed, I found chunks of coal I don't remember collecting. And Gravity Hill. It's changed. The road's buckled, a jagged split running down the center like a fault line. Kneel and press your ear to the crack, and you'll hear it. The faint clink-clink of metal on rock. Last night, under a full moon, I saw them. Fingers, splintered, bleeding, curling up through the asphalt. They're close now, and they're still pushing. Next time you drive uphill, roll down your window, listen. And whatever you do, don't take your foot off the brake. Story number 11. The Silent House on the Hill. The realtor called it a quaint fixer-upper, her voice slick with the kind of optimism that only comes from never having set foot inside. What she meant was, no one's lived here since the 60s, and the walls smell like regrets. The house was a wedding gift from Great-Aunt Lorna, a woman I'd met twice, once at my mother's funeral, once at hers. Her lawyer handed me the keys with a grimace. She said you'd hear the drip, he muttered, refusing to step past the threshold. The house crouched at the top of Harker's Hill, half swallowed by blackberry brambles and pines that leaned like crooked teeth. Inside, dust hung in the air like stale breath. Floors sagged, wallpaper peeled in Rorschach patterns, and every room held the faint, sweet rot of dried flowers. But the realtor was right about one thing. It was silent. No mice skittering, no wind whistling through cracks, just a thick, watchful hush, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then came the first storm. Rain battered the windows 3 nights after I moved in. I'd been unpacking boxes in the parlor, surrounded by Lorna's relics, moth-eaten lace curtains, a taxidermy fox missing an eye, and a grandfather clock frozen at 3:17. That's when I heard it. A single metallic plink. 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 It echoed from the hallway, sharp and deliberate. I followed the sound, my socks whispering over threadbare carpet, until I stopped beneath a water stain on the ceiling, a yellowed blister the size of a dinner plate. A droplet swelled, trembled, and fell into an ornate brass bowl on the floor. Plink! The bowl was full to the brim, but when I pressed my palm to the ceiling, it was bone dry. The drip came with every storm. Always the same spot, the same bowl. I emptied it, but by dawn, it would brim again. I tried moving the bowl to the kitchen sink. The droplet hit the floorboards and rolled uphill, snaking back to the brass rim. That's when I found the blueprints. They were tucked behind a loose baseboard in the pantry, brittle as autumn leaves. The house's original layout showed 4 bedrooms, but the second floor only had 3. I measured the walls with a tape I'd found in Lorna's toolbox, its metal pitted with rust. Behind a moth-eaten tapestry of a hunting scene, stag leaping, hounds snarling, the plaster sounded hollow. I chipped at it with a butter knife until the wallpaper tore, revealing a door. Painted shut, its knob crusted with age. The keyhole was clogged with dirt. When I jimmied it open, the hinges screamed. Inside, the air tasted of wet stone and copper. A single wooden chair faced a wall of crumbling brick. On the seat lay a porcelain doll, its face cracked down the middle, dress stained the color of old blood. And on the wall, in shaky charcoal, she's still here. The storms grew angrier. The drip became a deluge, the bowl overflowing, water spreading across the floor in rivulets that curled into words. Find me. I pried up floorboards with trembling hands. The crawl space was crammed with children's shoes, tiny leather boots, lace-ups, all caked in mud. Then came the whispers. Not voices, exactly. More like the hiss of a phonograph needle skating over a warped record. At night, The doll appeared in different rooms, facing the walls. Once, I woke to it perched on my dresser, head tilted, cracked eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Last week, I found the photo. Wedged behind the frozen grandfather clock, its edges nibbled by silverfish. Aunt Lorna as a girl, maybe 10, standing beside a woman in a waterlogged dress. Their faces were blurred, but the woman's hand gripped Lorna's shoulder too tightly, knuckles white. The caption, in spidery script, "Mother and I, 1947. The rain never stops. Tonight, the storm rages. The drip is a drumbeat, the bowl long overflowed, water pooling into arrows that point upstairs." The secret room's door hangs open. Inside, the doll sits on the chair. The brick wall has crumbled, revealing a cavity and a small skeleton, curled like a question mark. A rusted chain wraps its ankle, bolted to the floor. The water rises. Ankle deep now, icy and thick as oil. From the hallway, a wet footprint. Then another, coming closer. Story number 12. The Beehive Code. I never believed in curses, not until the bees showed me the coordinates. It started when I inherited my grandfather's apiary. He'd kept hives in the Appalachian foothills since the 40s, but after his stroke, they fell to me. The first time I inspected them, I noticed the pattern. The hives weren't arranged randomly. They formed a perfect hexagon. 6 hives, each spaced exactly 193 meters apart. Grandpa's journals called it the Dance of the Queens, but his shaky handwriting hinted at something darker. "They remember," one entry read. "They always remember." The bees acted off. They'd swarm the same patch of sky every dusk, forming a shimmering black cloud that hummed in sync, like a radio tuning to static. When I collected honey, the combs weren't hexagonal. They were letters. ZQ4, K712, coordinates. I mapped them. All pointed to a stretch of ocean 200 miles off Charleston. A Navy buddy ran the numbers. That's where the USS Grayling went down in '43. Submarine, crew of 76, never found. Grandpa's journal had a photo tucked inside. Him as a young man in uniform standing beside a sub's hatch. The caption, "Project Hive." They said it would win the war. That night, the bees swarmed my porch, not attacking, just watching. Their buzzing synced into a rhythm. Morse code. "Save us." I chartered a boat. The ocean was still, the air thick with salt and diesel. When the sonar pinged, the screen showed a shape, not a sub, a hive, a massive barnacled structure, its ribs curved into hexagons. I dove. The water turned gelid. My flashlight glinted off metal. The Grayling's hull split open like a cracked egg. Inside, the walls were covered in honeycomb. Not wax. Metal, etched with the same codes from my hives. And the bodies. They floated in the corridors, preserved in amber-colored resin. Sailors in rotted uniforms, mouths stretched wide, eyes replaced by glossy black orbs. Bee eyes. Something brushed my leg. A tendril of honeycomb, snaking from the dark. It pulsed, alive. I surfaced, vomiting seawater. The boat's radio blared static, then a voice. "They're in the hives. They're in the..." The transmission died. Back home, the bees vanished. The apiary was silent. But at night, I heard tapping. Inside the walls. Inside me. Grandpa's journal had a final entry, scrawled in red ink. "The code isn't a map. It's a countdown. They're coming home." Last week, blisters erupted on my hands. They burst, oozing honey. The doctor called it an allergic reaction, but when I sliced one open, a bee crawled out. Now the tapping's louder. The walls hum. And when I look in the mirror, my pupils glint, faceted, black. I think I know where the Grayling crew went. They're not dead. They're waiting. And the hives? They're almost full. Story number 13. The Phantom of the Phonebooth. The Phonebooth hunched at the edge of Route 9 like a forgotten sentinel, its glass panes webbed with cracks, the red paint peeling like sunburn. I hadn't planned to stop, but the storm had other ideas. Rain fell in sheets, drowning my windshield, and my phone had blinked out halfway through the mountain pass, leaving me stranded in the pitch-black belly of nowhere. The booth's flickering bulb cast a jaundiced glow over the asphalt as I slammed the car door and sprinted through the downpour, my boots slipping on mud. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and stale nicotine. The receiver dangled from its cord, swaying slightly, as if someone had just hung up. I dug a quarter from my pocket, 1998, the year Dad died, and dialed my sister's number. Static fizzed, sharp enough to make my teeth ache, and then a voice. "You're late." Not Jess. A man, his words waterlogged and frayed, like a recording played underwater. "Wrong number," I said, my thumb hovering over the hook. "Don't." The line crackled, urgency bleeding through. "They buried it under the oak, the one your mother never let you climb." My chest tightened. The voice. God, it sounded like Dad. Not the Dad from faded home videos, but the one I half remembered. The gravelly laugh, the way he'd drag his O's like a true Jersey boy. Dad, who'd vanished on Deal Lake when I was 6, his empty boat found drifting at dawn. Rain drummed the booth's roof. The light sputtered. "Who the hell is this?" "Dig there," he rasped. "Before they do." A truck roared past, spraying the booth with gravel. For a heartbeat, the line cleared, and I heard it. The faint lapping of water, a groan of rusted metal. A boat hull. "This isn't funny," I whispered, a wet cough. "You kept my harmonica in your glove box. Rusty, but still plays." Ice shot down my spine. The harmonica was in my car, tucked under a pile of gas receipts. I'd swiped it from Mom's attic after the funeral, a relic I'd carry through 6 states and 2 failed marriages. The line hissed. "They're coming, Danny. They know you have it." Headlights pierced the rain, a black van idling on the shoulder, windshield wipers thrashing. No plates. "Go, now!" The dial tone screamed in my ear. I drove blind, the van's headlights stalking me through back roads I hadn't seen since childhood. The old house appeared like a ghost. Windows boarded, porch sagging, the oak tree in the yard twisted and leafless. Mom had sold it after Dad's funeral, but the new owners had let it rot. I dug with my hands, mud seeping under my nails, rain soaking my collar. 3 feet down, my fingers hit metal. A lockbox crusted with rust. Inside, photos. Mom and Dad at a county fair, Dad's arm slung around a man in a police uniform I didn't recognize. A newspaper clipping from 1989. Local man vanishes in Deal Lake. Henry Voss, 34, disappeared after alleging corruption in the mayor's office. Police found his boat adrift, empty. His wife insists he was silenced. Beneath it, a child's crayon drawing. Me, Dad, and a stick figure dog under the oak. Scrawled in Mom's hand, "Don't trust them." The harmonica hummed in my pocket, low and dissonant. The van found me at a motel outside Poughkeepsie. 2 men in gray suits pounded on my door at dawn, their faces carved from granite. "Heard you've been asking about Henry Voss," the taller one said, his breath smelling of mint and gun oil. I played dumb. They left a business card on the nightstand, blank except for a phone number, but not before I spotted the holster under his coat. That night, the booth rang again. "Danny," Dad's voice, weaker now. "The lake, it's not water, it's a vault. They're all here, all the ones who knew." "Who's they?" "The mayor, the cops, everyone who built this town on bones. They're coming for you, too." The van idled outside, exhaust curling in the cold. Run! I'm in another booth now, 200 miles north. Rain taps the glass like fingernails. The receiver's cold in my hand. The quarter, 1998, worn smooth. It's been a week. The harmonica plays itself sometimes, notes warped and sour, always the same tune. Oh, Susanna Dad's favorite. The lockbox is buried in a cornfield outside Albany, but I dream about it nightly. The photos whispering, the drawings dog-bearing inky teeth. Tonight, the phone rang. I lift the receiver. Danny. Mom's voice this time, brittle as dried flowers. They found the box. The line dies. Outside, headlights cut through the storm. No engine noise, no tires, just the van. Rolling closer. Story number 14. The Indian Mirror Village. I didn't believe in curses until I saw my own corpse staring back at me. Let me explain, but you'll think I'm mad. I would have, too, before I went to Alaknanda. The village wasn't on any map. I found it by accident during a monsoon-soaked trek through Uttarakhand, my jeep axle-deep in mud. The locals called it Darpan Gayon, the Mirror Village. They spoke of it in hushed tones, fingers brushing amulets at their throats. Don't look too close, warned the tea seller who gave me directions. His own stall's mirror was draped in black cloth. The village appeared at dusk, a cluster of stone huts clinging to a hillside. Every wall, every door, was embedded with mirrors. Not the cheap kind from bazaars, but ancient things. Oval, hexagonal, some as large as wagon wheels, their silvering cracked like spiderwebs. The air smelled of camphor and wet stone. An old woman met me at the gate, her face a map of wrinkles. "You shouldn't have come," she said, refusing to meet my eyes. "The mirrors, they don't lie." They gave me a hut, its walls lined with palm-sized mirrors. "Cover them before sleep," the woman insisted, handing me a bolt of faded red cloth. I nodded, but didn't. Superstition, I thought. I was a photographer, here to document vanishing traditions, not cower from glass. At midnight, I woke sweating. The monsoon heat clung like a wet shroud. A sliver of moonlight pierced the window, hitting a mirror above my cot. I saw movement. My reflection sat up, but I hadn't moved. I was older. Much older. Papery skin, hair white and sparse, eyes milky with cataracts. The reflection mouthed words I couldn't hear, then pointed behind me. I turned. Nothing. When I looked back, the mirror was empty. At dawn, the village was silent. No clatter of pots, no children's laughter, just the click of mirrors settling in the heat. The old woman, Nirmala, brought me chai. Her hands shook. "You looked, didn't you?" "It was a trick of the light," I said too sharply. She peeled back her sari's edge. Around her neck hung a tiny mirror, its surface blackened with soot. "They show us as we'll be at the end, the moment breath leaves the body. My husband saw his reflection the day before the landslide took him. My daughter." She trailed off, polishing the soot with her thumb. "Why not break them?" Nirmala's laugh was bitter. "They grow back, like weeds." I met Rohan at the well, a boy of maybe 10, kicking a pebble across the stones. His shirt was buttoned to the neck, but I glimpsed the edge of a mirror on his chest. "Want to see mine?" he whispered, sly. Before I could stop him, he yanked a chain from under his shirt. The mirror was no bigger than a rupee coin, its edges gnawed by time. His reflection was a skeleton, not a clean one. Rot clung to the bones, moss filling the eye sockets. The jaw unhinged and a centipede crawled out. Rohan grinned. "I drown next monsoon. Mama says it'll hurt less if I don't fight." That night, I drank. local hooch that tasted of fermented pine. I stumbled back to my hut, tearing cloth from the walls. "Show me," I slurred, jabbing a finger at the largest mirror. "What's my big fucking finale?" The glass rippled like water. My reflection stood in a hospital room, gaunt and bald, tubes snaking from my nose. Behind me, a monitor flatlined. Number 2 mundane. Too real. I smashed the mirror with my boot. Shards sliced my palms, but I didn't care. I smashed another and another until the hut rang with cracks. Nirmala found me at sunrise, passed out in a nest of broken glass. "Fool," she spat. "Now they'll really show you." The mirrors grew back by noon. Not just in the hut. Every shard I'd broken sprouted like mushrooms after rain, multiplying across walls, ceiling, floor. I couldn't step without glass crunching underfoot. And the reflections, they weren't just deaths now. They were deaths in progress. A mirror by the door showed me choking on blood in a car wreck. Another, me old and trembling, a pistol in my mouth. The worst was the smallest one, a me with swollen eyes, hanging from a ceiling fan. "You'll choose this one," the reflection mouthed, smiling. "When it gets too heavy." Nirmala came at dusk with a clay pot. "Soot from the hearth," she said, painting my mirrors black. "It dulls the sight. For a while." "Why stay here?" I asked, voice raw. "Where else?" She gestured to the valley below, where storm clouds devoured the mountains. "The mirrors follow. Break 1 and 10 take its place. Leave the village and they'll fill your home, your cities, until everywhere you look." She didn't finish. I fled that night, blindfolded, fingertips brushing the Jeep's mirrors as I drove. The mountain road twisted, rain turning it to sludge. A figure stepped into my headlights. Rohan, arms spread, his skeleton reflection glowing in the glass. I swerved. The Jeep flipped, tumbling into the gorge. They pulled me from the wreck 3 days later. Broken ribs, a punctured lung, but alive. The hospital room had no mirrors, but this morning I found one in the bathroom. A shard no larger than a thumbtack, wedged in the tile grout. My reflection smiles. It's holding a noose. Story number 15. The Self-Writing Diary. I found the diary at a flea market in New Orleans, tucked between a stack of vinyl records and a rusted birdcage. Its leather cover was cracked, the edges worn smooth, and it smelled like salt water and mildew. The vendor, an old Creole woman with gold-capped teeth, warned me not to buy it. "Ça porte malheur," she muttered. Bad luck. But I'd never believed in curses until the ink started moving. The diary was empty when I bought it. Or so I thought. That night, I left it on my desk while I made tea. When I returned, a sentence sprawled across the first page in jagged, old-fashioned script. October 12th, 1837. The fever has taken Briggs. Captain says we'll jettison the body at dawn. God forgive us. The ink was sepia brown, the kind made from iron gall, and it reeked of brine. I laughed it off. A prank, I told myself. Maybe the vendor had rigged it somehow. But the next morning, another entry. October 13th, 1837. The crew whispers of mutiny. The storm circles like a carrion bird. I fear we shan't see port again. The handwriting was frantic, the letters slanting as if written in a hurry. I Googled the dates. The HMS Persephone, a British merchant ship, had vanished off the Gulf Coast in 1837. No survivors. The entries kept coming. October 15th, 1837. The water is black. Men are coughing blood. Captain has locked himself in his quarters. October 17th, 1837. The stars have vanished. The compass spins like a dervish. Something follows us in the fog. The ink bled through the pages, staining my desk. It left a metallic tang on my fingers, like pennies and rust. One night, I woke to the sound of scratching. The diary lay open, the pen I'd left nearby hovering above it. Words formed on their own, the nib digging so deep it tore the paper. They're in the walls. I visited the Maritime Museum, digging through archives until I found the Persephone's manifest. The crew list included a Nathaniel Cade, the ship's log keeper. His description matched the diary's voice, meticulous, paranoid, increasingly unhinged. The curator, a gaunt man with ink-stained cuffs, pulled me aside. We've had incidents with Cade's artifacts. A pocket watch that stopped at 3:17 a.m., a sextant that points inward. Best to leave his ghosts buried. But I couldn't. The diary had started writing during the day now, entries overlapping, ink pooling like bloodstains. They're in the walls. They're in the walls. They're in the... My reflection changed. My eyes looked darker, my skin sallow, as if I'd aged decades. I found myself humming shanties I'd never heard. My handwriting began to slant like Cade's. One entry froze me. October 23rd, 1837. The fever is in me. I hear them scratching. They want the diary. They want my bones. Beneath it, in shaky letters, help me. A hurricane hit New Orleans. As rain lashed my windows, the diary erupted in frantic script. They're here, in the house. The air turned frigid, smelling of rot and seaweed. Shadows pooled in the corners, thickening into shapes. Emaciated men in tattered uniforms, their eyes hollow, skin blistered with salt sores. They lurched toward me, fingers hooked like claws. The diary's pages flipped wildly, Cade's voice screaming in my mind, "Burn it!" I tossed the diary into the fireplace. It shrieked, a sound like steam escaping a corpse, as the leather curled and blackened. The shadows dissolved, leaving only the stench of burnt hair. The storm passed. The diary was ash. But this morning I found a new entry in my own journal, written in iron gall ink. November 1st, 2023. They're in the walls. They're in the walls. They're in the... My hands smell of brine. Story number 16. The Blind Woman's Colors. I lost my sight at 23, but I didn't lose color. Not really. It started with migraines, splintered flashes of gold and crimson behind my eyelids. Then, one morning, the world dimmed to a grainy haze, like an old film reel grinding to a halt. The doctors called it occipital lobe degradation. Fancy words for you'll never see the sky again? But they were wrong. The first time it happened, I was washing dishes. A storm growled over the Appalachian hills, and the kitchen window trembled with thunder. Then, there, a flicker of electric blue, not in my eyes, but deeper, in the marrow of my bones, in the hum of my teeth. By the third storm, I learned the colors had names. The blue was cerulean, sharp as a scalpel. It pulsed with the thunder, synced to the rhythm of the rain hammering the roof. I reached for it, my fingers passing through cold static. When lightning split the sky, the blue exploded into viridian, vermilion, auburn, colors I hadn't seen in years, now vibrating in my joints, my lungs, the roots of my hair. I laughed, cried, collapsed on the porch steps as the storm raged, colors dancing like wildfire under my skin. My neighbor, Mrs. Peeler, found me shivering at dawn. "Lord, child, you'll catch your death." She draped a quilt over my shoulders, her voice softening. "What's got you out here?" "The colors," I whispered. She went quiet. "Ain't no colors in the dark, Clara." But there were. Dr. Varma didn't believe me either. "Synesthesia," he said, tapping my MRI scans. "Crossed wires in the brain. You're translating sensory input into color." "No." I gripped the exam table, still tasting ozone. It's real. The storm's not just sound, it's showing me things. Shapes. Patterns. Like what? I hesitated. A hole. In the sky, not black, but a color I can't name. He prescribed pills. I flushed them. The colors grew stronger. Cerulean became a tunnel, vermilion a heartbeat. Then, during a hail strike, I saw it. The hole. Hanging above the pines, edges frayed like torn fabric. A color that hurt, deeper than violet, older than light. Something moved inside it. Not a shape. An anti-shape, erasing the colors around it. I screamed, but the thunder ate the sound. I began documenting the episodes. March 14th. Hole is larger. The anti-color spreads during lightning. It knows I'm watching. April 2nd. Heard voices in the rain. Not words, frequencies. The hole is hungry. April 19th. Mrs. Peeler says her dog won't stop howling. Found dead this morning. No marks, just empty. The entries bled. Literally. Ink turned to a thick, iridescent sludge that stained my hands for days, and that concludes our chilling accounts. But remember, these stories aren't just fiction. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more terrifying true tales. Sleep tight if you can. Until next time, stay safe in the dark.